The issue is, what has happened to the world since the financial crisis? And I think, in any financial crisis, it always takes a long time to recover. Henry mentioned that it has, strangely enough, been the longest era of peace in our society, in our broader society. And however, what the financial crisis did cause was a big gap between the haves and the have-nots. You're now faced with the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution, and there are people who are feeling very disadvantaged by the effect that the financial crisis actually had on them. The economic recovery has been particularly weak, and therefore, they've been subjected to populism, and that's why we've seen what has happened in part of the world. And obviously, I think the big issue that we have even in our own society is the fact that people feel left behind. When you look at what's happened in emerging markets in general, they were the place to be for quite some time. They really have not been the place to be over the last few years. If you look at Brazil, Russia, South Africa, just sort of like struggling along. It's only India that really has shown some kind of a growth trajectory. And obviously, you've always had China there growing at even 6.5% is adding $700 billion to GDP every year. So that sort of held things up. But we do expect them to start recovering. 80% of global growth comes from emerging market. 80% of growth in global consumption comes from emerging markets. So it is double what they were 20 years ago. Clearly, they have some challenges, as we've seen. Stagflation, recession, corruption, all these kinds of things that we witness every day in South Africa. South Africa is not the only emerging market with those kinds of issues. If you read about Russia, if you read about Brazil, if you read about what's been going on in Turkey, you get a very good idea. That's why somehow or other South Africa has always been one of the preferred places of investment in emerging markets, because people can trust what they see. I think the problem with South Africa is we got 28% unemployment. If you think about it, that's not even the right number. It's much higher. There's 7.5 million people not in education or employment. That is a massive number, and it is a time bomb. And I think clearly, we have one of the most unequal societies in the world, and it does disproportionately impact our black population at this point in time, where 1/3 of our people are on social grant. So this is a big challenge for us. It's not just a challenge for government, it's a challenge for all of us. And if we don't fix this, if we don't do something dramatic about this, then I think, we are going to suffer. I think, we know the economy is limping. They talk about growth, a little bit of growth for this year. I'm not sure I believe that yet. I think people are not happy with life. I think since we were actually doing very well with government, business and government were doing quite well. When Pravin was still there, then the uncle decided he must go. And from that day on, South Africa just went, and that's what we got to try and recover from. So that is a big, big challenge. At the moment, the Minister of Finance is behaving. He's doing the right things. Let's just hope, the proof in the pudding is in the eating. We're in a tough space in South Africa, and I think, it is partly political, but it's, mainly also confidence, which is pretty much linked. So I think we as a society have to also take some of this into our own hands. I think also the public protector, I know she became an authority on economics the other day, and she decided that the Reserve Bank must lose its independence. And fortunately, you haven't got a pushover as governor of the central bank, and he's battered her back pretty hard. And I guess things that she should be doing is chasing down the people named in the Gupta leaks. She's now talking about economic policy. She did back off, but I think we're still waiting to hear whether she has a right to say anything, because she has so much authority in her office that if she's not turned over by a court, then it becomes fact. So I think that was a very reckless thing. And I think, today we are faced with a situation where we can't blame the world for our recession. We can't blame the world for where we are, because the world is in a much better space. We can only blame ourselves. So I think business leadership has become a lot more vocal. They see themselves as part of the solution. You will hear a lot more coming from them over the next while, because we think that it's only business that can really help government lead us out of this malaise. And I think, there is a talk about radical economic transformation. Probably I'll get into an argument with Zweli later. When we get onto that subject, we talk about it as accelerated inclusive growth. I think we also, must make sure that we continue to protect and strengthen our core institutions, and that the country sees business as a national asset, because most of the jobs come from business. Government got 2.5 million employees. They got no more money, so they can't spend money. They can't hire. Only business can make a difference. And that's not only large business. Most of the people are in small businesses, so we all have a significant role to play. I think as a society, we need to build on our strengths. We have disciplined monetary policy, up to now disciplined fiscal policy. We have a very good infrastructure. If you look at an emerging market, I think we have one of the soundest infrastructures. We have a developed and capable private sector with a strong corporate sector. We have a great constitution and an independent judiciary, very different to what we're seeing with a fellow in Venezuela. We can just have some kind of constitutional assembly and then just remove whoever he feels like removing. And then I think we have strong credibility of some of our public institutions. And on top of that, we're a top tourist destination. I think of interest is the second largest export for a country like Australia is education tourism. There are a whole host of areas as a society where we can create more jobs, where we can make a significant difference to creating a growth environment. I think at the end of the day, we need accelerated growth. We need it to be urban-led, private sector-driven, enabled by a smart state. That's what I loved about the National Development Plan. It talked about building a capable state, except, they haven't made much progress on that front at this point in time, and targeted at mass employment. If we look at the world, I think, the world is growing, and is probably likely to grow faster. Predictions are that global growth continues to rise. So, as I said earlier, we can't blame the world. I think at the end of the day, if we come back to South Africa, it's very clear that we need a new social pact that transcends ideologies and backgrounds. I think, I was excited the other day when the Minister of Finance said, well, they're going to look for private sector capital to help them in state-owned enterprises. I think the biggest risk we have as a country at this point in time is the way these state-owned enterprises are governed and the threat that they place on our fiscal ability, or our country balance sheet, if I can call it that. If we don't tackle, and now they talk about tackling the state-owned enterprise, we don't tackle and stop the rot in the state-owned enterprises. SAA, you read today, they need 13 billion rand injection over the next 3 years to stop the banks from pulling the lines. Eskom have got government guarantees of over 300 billion. And if that thing trips, God help us. So we have a big responsibility as the corporate sectors, the banking sector, society at large, to help government fix these state-owned enterprises. And I think that is one of our big challenges. I think, for the rest of us, it's not just about blaming government. We all have roles to play as individuals in our society, as corporates, as members, members of society. This, we can't put the whole blame on government. We have a lot to do. But I think it's very important for us to unite under a common purpose and actually start changing the landscape and changing the messaging and changing the narrative, because there is too much to lose in our country. And I think it is up to all of us, particularly people that are sitting in this audience. You can all make a difference. I know you try, but whatever we do, we need to do a hell of a lot more. And that's the message we are sending out to our people. Whatever you do, you need to triple or quadruple, whether it's business, whether it's individuals in society. You all have to do a lot more, because there is too much to lose. So hopefully, I think, we've got a big day tomorrow. We've got a big day in the middle of December. If none of that resolves itself, then we have to wait till 2019 when we can vote again. So I'm still positive. I know I'm sounding maybe too negative today. I think South Africa has a lot to give and a lot to change. But I think we can make great progress if we put our heads together as a society.